Please take a seat.
Can I ask everyone entering the hall to please take their seats? And good afternoon, conference. We now move to SC4, a fair deal for rural communities, which you can find on pages 20 to 22 of your conference agenda. Can I call on Ray Georgeson from Midlothian and Borders to stand by, and I call David Green from Highland, who is our candidate for MSP up there, of course, to propose the motion.
Hello. How are we all doing? Do you all enjoy your lunch? Excellent. A few still a bit tired. Okay, conference, as pleased as I am to be here in Glasgow, and I thought Daniel O'Malley's speech first thing this morning was fantastic. I don't see him in the room now for mine, but that was pointed out. But as delighted as I am to be here, I have to say the state of our country leaves me pretty frustrated. When I speak to people right across the far north, all too often I hear apathy and frustration. Comments of being left behind, of being ignored, of being forgotten. Communities in the Highlands, and I know across swathes of rural Scotland too, simply feel that things today are not working as they should. But it's no wonder. If we just look at the last 2 decades of an SNP government, their record, from the centralisation of the police to the ill-judged attempt to impose highly protected marine areas, and of course the ongoing ferry fiasco. This catalogue of decisions, running against the interests of Highland communities, embodies what I think is a broken relationship between this SNP government and rural Scotland. Conference, I've told you before in Inverness about the teacher that I met in Dornoch, who has to room with a colleague on the west coast during the week because there isn't available housing. About the elderly woman I met in Ballantor, who was left isolated in her home over winter because she fears the damage that potholes will do to her car if she drives at night. And about the vast majority of expectant mums to be in Caithness who have to travel 100-mile-plus journeys in order to give birth at hospital in Inverness. But we didn't arrive here by chance. We arrived here because, quite frankly, there are, I think, too many in the SNP who have for too long chosen to toe the party line instead of standing up for the interests of rural communities. I just think Scotland deserves better. But let me tell you, the clock is ticking, and come May 2026, with your help, from the northeast of Scotland to the Highlands to the borders, Jeremy Purvis, to the borders, we can call time on those SNP MSPs. But when people feel that decisions are being imposed on them and not made with them, winning elections alone is simply not good enough. As Liberals, we all believe in the value of community. We know that community is a safeguard against isolation and inequality. And we know that strengthening our communities is the best way to empower people to make decisions that best reflect their needs. And that, folks, is what this motion is all about. We are proposing new legislation to rural-proof government policy by ensuring all laws are subject to a rural community's impact assessment. And to be clear to rural communities that we are on their side, the motion also calls for ongoing monitoring and a requirement on ministers to regularly report on the well-being and sustainability of rural communities. And we're proposing this motion in the same spirit that we voted for the 2018 Islands Act, an act that I supported Lee MacArthur and Tavish Scott to amend in order to better reflect the needs of island communities. And yes, that did mean ensuring that Shetland is no longer in a box. Conference, we know that rural Scotland needs change, but when the Tories, the SNP, Labour have all lost the public trust, it is up to us, I think, to step up with a plan. To step up with a plan that ensures something better than the manipulation of hope offered by reform. So when our party leader, Alex Hamilton, talks about the need for change with fairness at its heart, this is what he means. It means fixing this government's broken relationship with rural Scotland by empowering and strengthening those communities. That's our job, folks. That's our mission. And that is what this motion seeks to do. So please support the motion, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Can I now call on Councillor Yipe Chow-Turvey to stand by, and I now call Ray Jorson from Midlothian and Borders, who is speaking for the motion as a whole.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Conference. First of all, thank you very much to David for an excellent moving of the motion, which I'm very much in support of. The issues that you describe with your focus on the Highlands very much chime with us down in the Borders as well. We need fresh and positive attention and policy for our rural communities across Scotland. For far too long, we have been neglected by the SNP, and as far as our Tory MPs and MSPs are concerned, well, they're about as much use as the proverbial chocolate teapot. Marginalised, irrelevant, they have no influence, they need to be gone. And one by one, we are getting rid of them. And, you know, if there's one endangered species I wouldn't be in favour of preserving, it's Tory MSPs. I'm very much in support of this motion. I want to highlight in particular something that I think symbolises everything that's good about it and why we need this fresh rural focus. And I wanted to concentrate briefly on the issues around transport connectivity, line 9 in the summary. And I want to draw your attention to the long-running saga of the extension of the Borders Railway, which, as you know, from when it was rebuilt a few years ago, extends out from Edinburgh as far as Tweedbank, Galashiels, but really needs to go all the way through to Carlisle, through Hawick and Newcastleton. This is a long-running saga. It's been going on for far too long on the agenda, been on a back burner. There is a feasibility study now live, and there is a prospect that it could happen, and it should happen. And it symbolises everything that's wrong about the track record of our predecessors and this history of kind of neglect and really, keeping the rural issues too much down the agenda. This is an area that is desperate for regeneration, certainly in the western half of the Borders. And if we put our voices firmly behind the campaign to extend the Borders Railway, we will help to unlock great opportunities in terms of rural tourism, better travel to work, extension of genuine economic development. You may know already there's a £400 million investment coming from Centre Parks just outside Hawick, and it's going to be a great opportunity to make that a kind of more of an eco-tourism focus and not just a rural tourism focus. It's good for the climate, and most importantly, as I said, it's good for rural regeneration that we so desperately need. It's the good old Waverley route. Most of the track bed is still there. It needs political will, it needs effort, and it needs that fresh rural focus, I think, which this motion addresses so elegantly.
Can I ask you to draw your remarks to a close, please, Ray?
I was just about to do that. Please support the Borders Railway extension, and please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Can I ask Trevor Mason from Aberdeenshire to stand by? And I now call Councillor Yipe Chow-Turvey, who is our lead candidate on the North East Scotland regional list.
Hello, good afternoon, Conference. I'm speaking to you in support of the motion today as a councillor of Aberdeenshire, which is the second in size in Scotland, but the latest tree in the funding. But also, I'm speaking to you as a mum living in a rural area within the community where the risk and threat of losing our nurseries, or schools, or bus lines, and our health service hang above people's heads every day. Our society is changing. In many sectors, working from home or remotely are welcome for people to balance their life. But that change doesn't apply to a rural economy. Our forests, or farms, or rivers, or harbours are where they are, and the people who work in those industries are not able to change that way of life. The notion calls for that the Scottish Government to enable the review the shape of local authorities and funding formula, and that's the only way to tackle the crisis we are facing. As a colleague of mine said at the latest budget preparation, we as representatives today are dying by 1,000 cuts. At the latest Civility in Public Roundtable organized by COSLA, I have pointed out to Shona Robinson that the decisions they are making in the budget in the Scottish Government that landed us where we are today, the anger of our community, where the core services are not met because the budget doesn't follow up to a local council who have to fund everything people need in their daily life. The community hospitals, or rural schools, or rural nurseries, the bus services, the costs to deliver in those vast places is just too dearly to cover by our councils. And that's why we have that anger in our community and that aim towards our representatives. Is someone said, a former councillor said to me, I don't want to be a councillor right now. Good luck to you. So, conference, I really push you to support this motion because the problem across the country right now can only be fixed that if we can improve those services, the core services to people, and then we can make and give a rural community a fair deal. Thank you.
Thank you, EP. Can I now ask Claire McLaren to stand by, and I call Councillor Trevor Mason from Aberdeenshire, who is speaking for the motion.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Conference. As a councillor in Aberdeenshire, I can see the deterioration of our rural infrastructure. Public transport is disappearing completely in some areas. Pubs are closing, as people are quite rightly not prepared to drink and drive. Schools are closing as people numbers fallen, which has a domino effect at nurseries closing as well. Traditionally, much of the community support came from the church, which has now dwindling congregations and can now no longer provide the same support as they did in the past. We need to address these concerns before building more houses. Maybe it's a different way of thinking we need. No one will retire to an area where there are no bus services and will end up a prisoner in their own house when they have to give up driving. I have spoken to a number of people in my ward who are moving to a larger town, to Aberdeen or Inverurie, because they can't drive anymore and they're isolated. It is unlikely that church congregations are about to increase massively, so we must find a way to support the community better. I know councils already support communities in their area, but we should do it better. Public transport situation in Aberdeen is dire. Aberdeenshire, should I say, it is dire. When I get a bus, I notice there are few people between the ages of 22 and 60, which means there were very few fare-paying passengers. There are no tickets issued to people with bus passes, so as far as the statistics are concerned, there's very few people travelling by bus. What I'm about to suggest may be very controversial. Should all passengers with bus passes pay half fare? I would like to think about that. Should all passengers with bus passes pay half fare? If it's a case of no buses against paying half fare, I know which I would choose. We must start making these uncomfortable decisions. Maybe this issue could be proposed in another motion at the next conference. Rural proofing is essential for us to move ahead. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Can I ask Councillor Jeff Goodhall to stand by? And I now call Claire McLaren from Perth and Kinross, who is speaking for the motion.
Conference. Rural communities are an important part of the DNA of Scotland, and we must give them focus. Focus to ensure that they have a sustainable future. And that sustainability covers so many areas: employment, housing, connectivity, services, essential services, education, health and social care. We are on a bit of a knife edge with some of this in rural communities. Certainly within my council ward, I'm seeing this. We've got a health and social care initiative set up, which is trying to think outside the box. We have many rural stakeholders, Scottish Land Estates, NFU and others, who are so well versed on the issues that are surrounding the sustainable rural communities. We must ensure that their voices are in our policies going forward. I totally support the asking of the Scottish Government to apply a statute, Rural Communities Impact Assessment. I also believe that we should have a health and well-being assessment, impact assessment in planning, because I do believe that some of planning legislation would benefit from that, and particularly in the rural areas. I would like to see the rural economy recognised. The rural economy in Scotland provides, I think it's something like 20 billion, I think it is, towards between the agricultural, the food producing sector, as well as the Scottish food and drink sector. So we have so much coming out of our rural communities and our rural areas in Scotland. Crofting, agriculture, generational land management. The rural areas are so vital towards the Scotland that we wish to create as Liberal Democrats and sustain. So, Conference, I do support this motion, and I hope you all do too.
Thank you, Claire. Can I ask Neil Alexander to stand by to summate the motion? And I now call Councillor Jeff Goodhall from Aberdeenshire East, who is speaking for the motion.
Thank you. I'd ask you to vote for this motion for some very good pragmatic and political reasons. I'm a councillor in one of the most remote rural wards in Aberdeenshire, and that's saying something. And I would like to start by, how could I put it, attacking the SNP government and the green hangers-on. 20-minute neighbourhoods. Have you ever heard of that policy? The idea is that for 10 minutes you walk and you get all the essential services that you need within your community. And for a rural community, whether it's in the Highlands, Islands or Aberdeenshire, is absolute nonsense. And even before you look at the borders and all the rest of it. The whole concepts that have come out of the SNP party are nonsense when it comes to rural. I'm the chair of NESAG, North East Scotland Agricultural Advisory Group. And on a daily basis, I hear stories about rural and the issues that rural people have to face. And it's not just a 20-minute neighbourhood that we have in rural Aberdeenshire. It's a 3-hour or a whole day neighbourhood. Because if you have to go into ARI from Riney, if you go into ARI from Huntly, it takes you all day by bus to get into Aberdeen, a couple of changes, and get back home again. It's all nonsense. And this is so very important to us as a party, and for me particular, because I'm actually our candidate for Aberdeenshire West. Rural economy is what the benefits of rural economy to our party are superb as far as our political views are concerned. We can make so much political how can I put it? Our politics in Aberdeenshire is concentrated on rural and it's concentrated in agriculture. We have a really good policy on rural, a really good policy in agriculture, and I think this is part of it. We need that. If we don't get it, We will not do well in the election, but if we have a very strong policy for this election, we can have more MSPs than ever before. And that's what it all means, more MSPs. Strong policy, strong leadership, and we can get there. I intend to take Aberdeenshire West. We're going to have something on the list, and we're going to take Aberdeenshire East. And these policies are what we need to see that through. So I ask Conference to support this policy wholeheartedly and vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I now call Neil Alexander from Highlands to submit the motion.
I did not pay Sally to do that. Conference, this motion speaks to the heart of our Liberal Democrat values. It's what we are part of this party for, and I want to start by thanking every one of the speakers today, of which there was a real showing of the high calibre of candidates that we have for the Scottish Parliament next year. So honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for everybody who has spoken. Firstly, we started with the proposal from David, who I thought gave real-world examples and the impacts of centralisation by this SNP government, as well as the need for this rural proofing motion that we are putting forward and leading on, finishing on his kind of message for hope for his constituency and how we can be that voice to the people of the Highlands and in rural communities. Ray, I also thought you spoke incredibly well, and I loved your analysis of the chocolate teapot, but personally I think that's an insult to chocolate teapots, comparing them to the SNP government. And also spoke well on things such as local transport issues, which really speaks to my heart, seeing how there are issues with train connections and stuff in my own constituency. Councillor Ipe, I also thought, really echoed well the frustration in local communities up in the North East, and I think she really demonstrated why she is a really strong candidate at the top of our North East list next year. Councillor Trevor Mason as well, I thought you had this really strong thing that we mentioned about being a prisoner in your own home. It really spoke to me a wee bit, especially when you do lose the ability to drive a car. It's something we've experienced in my own family as well. So you do lose a lot of that independence, and I thought that was a really powerful example that you used. Claire as well, I thought there were some really thoughtful things about impact assessments, as well as encouraging engagement with key stakeholders like the NFU, which I know Alistair Carmichael also does incredibly well in winning all of his lovely awards. And then Jeff, I really enjoyed how you kind of brought it home, speaking about the experience of your constituents. I thought that was incredibly powerful, so thank you for sharing those stories. And as somebody who has travelled on buses on that A96, you're completely speaking to the choir here. So Conference, like I was saying, this motion speaks to our Liberal Democrat values. Every person, regardless of where they live, deserves to be heard, respected and served by their government. Scotland needs community-based, community-led politics where we listen and deliver for local people no matter where they live in a village, town or city. And so when the Scottish Human Rights Commission found that across the Highlands and Islands, where I am a candidate, one of our most rural regions, that basic human rights are under threat with access to affordable food, housing and healthcare services, I was alarmed because Conference, that is a disgrace and it has happened on this SNP's watch. I myself have lost count of the number of stories that I've heard of long waits and travel times for healthcare facing folk in my constituency and up in the Highlands and Islands and in the North East as well. Me and my fiancée ourselves have experienced that firsthand. Because of the lack of medical care in our rural communities, that is also putting pressure on one of our most rural of cities in Inverness, which already has the connectivity issues that it does. Raigmore Hospital is always overwhelmed in terms of capacity for beds and critical care, and also is one of the oldest hospitals in the whole of Scotland in its original building. It's crumbling while Central Belt hospitals are being rebuilt under the SNP, and it is time that pressure on NHS staff is lifted by giving them more access to local healthcare for constituents where they live. Healthcare should be local. But it's not just healthcare and roads that people feel forgotten about. And believe me, I could talk about the Nairn bypass all day. It's also our children's education. Now, I passionately believe that every child, no matter where they live, should have an access to a good education. Yet time after time, we are hearing the horror stories over the lack of support for children with additional support needs in our rural communities. One of the few Highland ASN sports schools, Drummond and Inverness, again under that unbearable pressure because there are only 2 other facilities across the Highlands which are too small, parents are openly saying that the lack of staff support is putting their children in danger every day and they are regressing in school. Conference, no child should be feeling that way. No parent should feel that their child is in danger when they go to school. It's time for the government minister at Holyrood to stop turning a blind eye to our rural communities and do what Lib Dems have been calling for already. Get more staff support in our schools for children with additional support needs, no matter where those schools are. That's real rural proofing, and what we're seeing from the SNP government is rural abandonment. So, conference, it doesn't matter if it's the NHS, mental health, or children's education. Our Highland and our rural communities right across Scotland have not been heard for too long. But we will be their voice. We will be the light in the dark. And we will stand up for the forgotten communities no matter where they live. That's what real rural proofing is about. That's what this motion is about. Please support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. We now move to the vote. Can I remind members that to vote you must be seated and the voting side of your pass must be facing me. Can I see all those in favour of the motion? And anyone who is against the motion? That motion is clearly carried. I'd like to thank my aide, Andy Williamson, my runner in the hall, Mel Sullivan, and I now pass the chair over to our party convener, Jenny Lang.
Thank you very much, Conference. You don't actually have to hear from me very much at all because we have a very important tribute coming up to Lord Mingus Campbell of Pittenweem, and I would like to call on Wendy Chamberlain MP and Willie Rennie MSP to lead that tribute.
Good afternoon, Conference. It is a real privilege to be standing here as the Member of Parliament for North East Fife and to stand with Willie to pay tribute to Lord Campbell of Pittenweem, our Ming, who passed away last month. And on Tuesday, members across the House of Commons, including Christine and the Prime Minister, took the time to pay tribute to Ming in Parliament. And I know that he would have been quietly delighted with what was said, particularly with the many mentions of his beloved Elspeth. I know that many of you here knew him for much longer than I, and better than I did. For example, Ian, his MSP contemporary in North East Fife, and those who did know him will have their own memories of him. But reading the obituaries and tributes in recent days, including Alistair's in Parliament's House magazine, you can see that determination, competitiveness and his liberal values ran right through every facet of Ming's life. Following my own election in 2019, despite COVID, Ming was a huge help and support to me, and his attendance in the Lords was diligent and his NATO work exemplary. Most months, I would pop up to his office in the Lords. I think he was quite impressed that I could actually find it, and leave a note inviting him for tea and scones in the Pugin room. It felt a note was the right way to make that happen. And once there, he would quiz me on current happenings in North East Fife and the people I needed to speak to in order to get things done. And there was usually something or someone that I hadn't thought of. I recall speaking to him on the day of Elspeth's death, and for it to happen just as she returned home from a spell in hospital was devastating for him and her other family and friends. And although Ming returned to London and the House of Lords and worked thereafter, I think we all know he was never quite the same. A fall at home curtailed his activities, and although delighted to have him back in the Lords earlier this year, it didn't feel like it would be sustainable, and sadly so it has proved. I last saw him a week before his death at the care home in Fulham, where he passed away. We had a short conversation. Something that I now reflect on was quite a goodbye conversation, because he was very keen that his affairs were in order. An Olympian, an advocate, a parliamentarian and a companion of honour, a life well lived and a friend to this party, of this party, who will be very much missed.
Both Wendy and I and many others were at Ming's funeral earlier on this week, and it was a really fitting send-off. It was a nice, sunny day in the Trossachs on the shores of the Lake of Menteith. The autumn leaves were on the trees. There was a shaft of sunlight coming down. And all the people who really held him in high regard were gathered round in the church. And it was, I think, a splendid day. His grandson, Gregor, gave quite an unusual eulogy because it was actually, I think, unvarnished. And he'd spent a lot of time with Ming over the last few months and talked about his grit. And it's not something that was probably often recognised with Ming, but he was very gritty. You wouldn't think from the suits that you wore or the ties that you had, the finest suits, the shiniest shoes. He was somebody who took his attire very, very importantly. But Gregor talked about his grit. And somebody from his background in Glasgow to become an advocate and a QC was quite something in itself. And to go on to be Lord Campbell of Pitt and Weem, a community that he held very close to his heart. But he was also achieved education at Glasgow University and Stanford. He was the Flying Scotsman. Now, for anybody who's an athlete, I pretend to be an athlete, but Ming was really an athlete. It is relentless, the number of sprints you have to do over and over and over again, through the rain, all weathers, no matter how you feel. That grittiness to get right to the top, to be the fastest Scotsman on the planet was quite something. That was gritty. And then something we all understand, that he stood in over 13 years in 5 different general elections before he won, from 1974 to 1987. He never gave up, from Greenock to North East Fife. That is grittiness. And then to win for 28 years on the trot, through all the turbulence in the party and beyond, that's grittiness. And then to stand up against the establishment who were advocating for the war in Iraq, and to put up with all the jeers and the derision from everybody at that time, I think that is grittiness. And then something that Lord Purvis has just reminded me of, his support of David Steele when David stood up against the Springboks on the anti-apartheid tour in 1970 when they were doing the rugby tour in the Borders. That's grittiness. That's standing up against the establishment. When he had his cancer and he endured and survived through that cancer episode and came back and was even stronger when he came back, that's grittiness. I think Ming Campbell was the essence of being a Liberal. He was the essence of being gritty. And I'm here in large part because of Ming. I remember the first Focus newsletter that came through our house in Strathmiglo. My first vote was for Ming Campbell. First vote, and it got him elected. I'm not saying it was all me, but it got him elected. And he was part of that generation, wasn't he? Of Paddy Ashdown, of David Steele, of Shirley Williams, of Charles Kennedy, who I think certainly recruited me to the party. That's why I joined. I looked up to those people. They were the Liberal Democrats and the Liberal Party and the SDP before that. I joined. And Ming was there when I got elected in Dunfermline. Have I talked about Dunfermline before? But he was there. He came and he campaigned with me. And he was the leader of the party after I won the Dunfermline by-election, and he steadied the ship. And importantly, he stood down when he recognised it wasn't in the party's interest for him to continue as leader. He recognised that it was in the best interests of everyone. That is grittiness. And he was there to support me when I was elected to North East Fife, and for Wendy in North East Fife as well, and was still campaigning with us throughout that time. Ming Campbell, for me, was my idol. He was something I looked up to, somebody I looked up to. And I want you, at the end of what I'm about to say, to show your appreciation. But you are about to have the fundraiser. And the fundraiser in North East Fife involved handing round the Ming vases. And lots of money were put in the Ming vases. So when the yellow buckets come round today, I want you to think of Ming. I want you to think of the Ming vases, and I want you to put everything that you own into those buckets. But finally, if you can just, if you're able to, stand and show your appreciation for Lord Campbell of Pittenweem.
Thank you so much for that really lovely tribute to Ming. I think Willie's just given away the secret, which obviously you know doesn't always happen just before the leader's speech, that we do have a fundraiser and there will be buckets about to come round any moment. And I'm going to hand that fundraiser over to Christine Jardine, MP.
Probably all wondering why I've got onto stage looking like a giant peach. Oh, almost forgot. Well, it's quite simple. Willie Rennie keeps telling us all, think peach. Think peach ballot paper. And to explain why, I've put together this little story for you today. And I've called it CJ's Tale of Alex and the Giant Peach Ballot Paper. So what exactly is this giant peach ballot paper? Or, as boring people call it, the list election. This giant peach ballot paper I want you to think of as the thing that we Liberal Democrats love more than anything else. We will travel the length and breadth of the country on a Saturday night to go somewhere where there is a raffle. But this raffle only has one ticket, one giant peach ticket with lots of names on it, on which we want our name selected. Take this off, it's a bit annoying. And why do we want our name selected? And how are we going to get our name selected? Well, the how comes down to the yellow bucket. You're going to put lots of money in there so we can get that other thing that we love or hate more than anything else. Leaflets. Thousands and thousands of leaflets, each, to give out to our friends, family, community, strangers we meet in the street, houses that have no names on them, leaflets, to explain to people why they should be getting that big peach ticket and putting their cross beside Liberal Democrats. And when that money goes in, well, look for inspiration to the original tale of the giant peach. And it tells of two greedy ants, or as you and I know them, Ed Thornley and Paul Trollope. And all that money will come rolling into them, and they will put the money out to get those leaflets to instruct the Scottish public in how to take part in our giant raffle with that peach, say it again, peach ticket. We want their votes on that as much as the first one. But why do we want them to vote for us on that peach ballot paper? We want them to vote for us on that peach ballot paper because that is the way that we can guarantee lots and lots of Liberal Democrat MSPs. Just think about it for a moment. The Greens were in government. Lorna Slater was a minister. No disrespect to Lorna Slater, but Lorna Slater was a minister with a fraction of the votes that were Alex Cole-Hamilton and Willie Rennie's majority. Because we didn't sell the peach paper to people in the last election. We didn't tell them about the benefits of the peach paper and how it could change Scotland for the better. We let others benefit from that. So this time round, get into that raffle. Get your money in, buy your tickets now, get your leaflets, get them out to people, and tell them that we want to win on the peach paper. And why do we want to win? We want to win because that's the way that we remove the SNP from power. And why? Because Scotland deserves better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. It now gives me huge pleasure to invite to the stage a very good friend of mine and someone that you all know very well, our leader, Alex Cole-Hamilton, MSP. My apologies, I'm actually inviting Adam Harley, who is one of our candidates, to introduce Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you for that, Jenny. That's a wonderful way to break the ice. And I'm glad to know I'm a good friend of yours. I feel the same. So yeah, thank you, Jenny. For those who don't know me, I'm a candidate for Strathkelvin and Bailsden, which is a... Thank you. That's our target seat just outside Glasgow, and I'm also the lead candidate on the West of Scotland list. Strathkelvin and Bailsden is the Holyrood equivalent of the Mid-Dumbartonshire seat that Susan Murray won so brilliantly at the general election last year. And since being selected in March, I've along with a fantastic team of volunteers, I've been out knocking on doors 4 or 5 times a week. And I mention that just because I'd love to have you come and join me. As the old saying goes, all roads lead to Strathkelvin and Bailsden. And if we put in a power of work, and if Lib Dems far and wide come and help out, then we will beat the SNP and win next year. So you'll be hearing from me. It's been a real privilege talking to so many people on the doors, and some conversations have been heartwarming and others have been pretty sobering, because so many people feel worn down and burnt out at the minute, waiting too long for NHS treatment, struggling with soaring bills and feeling that Scotland is heading in the wrong direction. That's a feeling I share, and it's a big part of why I decided to run for Parliament. Many people have also lost faith in politics to make their lives better, and that's a challenge for all of us and one we can't take lightly. And I believe the only way to rebuild hope is by turning up, genuinely listening, and then taking action with optimism and heart. And I can't think of anyone who embodies that spirit of optimism and action more than the leader of this party. Alex has lived the liberal values we believe in every day as a youth worker before politics, as host to a Ukrainian refugee last year, and now in leading our party every day with compassion and energy. He's also someone who travels the length and breadth of Scotland by plane, train and automobile just to knock on doors and meet people. A few weeks ago, I messaged him on the morning of a storm to offer to cancel a canvassing session he was due to be part of. He replied almost instantly, "Absolutely not. Extreme canvassing is my favourite." Please welcome the leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Wow. Thank you, Conference, and thank you in particular to Adam. Conference, when I first met Adam, he introduced himself to me as a former pirate. That's not the strangest introduction I've had when meeting a new Liberal Democrat, but it is up there. While living and working in London, Adam was a homework volunteer with an organisation called the Hackney Pirates. They help disadvantaged kids, often from single-parent families, with their schoolwork in the evenings. He's worked as a Deliveroo driver, a RADA-trained actor, and a charity worker fighting to secure life-changing treatments for cystic fibrosis patients. But he always found the time to offer mentorship to those adrift from school or at risk of offending. That speaks to a community spirit that has punctuated his approach both to life and to politics. Adam is now raising a young family where he grew up, just up the road in Bishopbriggs. So go knock doors for him. Susan Murray, as we've heard, won the equivalent seat just last year. And like then, it's a straight fight between us and the SNP, because he is on the verge of making history, Conference, as the first ever Liberal Democrat representative for Strathkelvin and Bearsden in the Scottish Parliament. Conference, it's great to be back here in Glasgow, home to one of our country's greatest seats of innovation, creativity and of learning, the alma mater of Charles Kennedy, and of course, our dear friend Ming Campbell. And if you'll permit me to say a few words of my own tribute. 3 weeks ago, Ming slipped away from us, a giant of our party and a regular at our conferences since the 1970s. He grew up in a flat just a short walk away in Kelvin Bridge. Conference, my first political act of any kind took place on the morning of the 1987 general election. I was 9 years old. At 4 a.m., my father woke me from my sleep and bundled me out the door to help him deliver good morning leaflets to the entirety of our village in Fife. They were from Ming Campbell. I did so without complaint because Dad had taken me to Ming's adoption meeting just a few weeks previously. And at that young age, in just a few minutes, I was absolutely spellbound by the man who would come to lead our party, who would go on to mentor me, and who so many of us counted as our friend. He had a voice that was respected in the living rooms of Great Britain, a command of international affairs that was unparalleled. He was right about apartheid, about Hong Kong, about our place in Europe, and yes, about Iraq. Many commentators have described him as the greatest foreign secretary that we never had. I am greatly comforted by the thought that he is once again reunited with the love of his life and matriarch of our party, Lady Elspeth. She is probably fussing over him now, in a plume of cigarette smoke, and securing him a preferential seat in the choir of St. Peter. Ming, we miss you. And today we rededicate ourselves to the promise of the liberal society that you gave your life to. Thank you. Conference, the foundations of that liberal society and a strong economy are built on the health and well-being of our citizens. But right now, under the SNP, our NHS is in a state of perma-crisis. Conference, to fix our health service, you've got to get the front door open and moving freely. And traditionally, that front door has always been your GP. Scottish Liberal Democrats secured £15 million more for GPs in the Scottish budget this year to alleviate some of the recruitment and retention issues that practices are struggling with right now to make it easier for people to see their GP. Money is certainly part of it, but we need a change of government to fix what the Royal College of GPs say is a state of crisis. The damage done by the SNP can't be unpicked by a single budget or by a flashy pre-election policy headline. It requires a realistic plan to get things done. So, at the coming election, we will commit to train and recruit new staff like nurses, mental health professionals and physiotherapists to get them into every GP practice in Scotland, to clear down those appointments. End the ridiculous requirement for a GP's wet signature on every prescription that passes through the practice. Roll out AI language models in consulting rooms to listen to appointments and generate notes and referrals. These are already being used safely in some surgeries and could save GPs masses of bureaucracy. We'd increase the number of GPs and their share of the NHS budget. And crucially, conference, let's give infants over 70s and everyone with long-term health conditions access to a named GP, someone who knows them. Because the evidence shows that having a GP who knows you well, can see when something isn't right, lowers the chance of emergency and expensive emergency admissions. Most people have to wait weeks for non-urgent care. Deliver our plan, and we can enable everyone to be seen within 5 working days, because Conference Scotland deserves better. So let's rip up the bureaucracy, back our staff, get our people well, and deliver the first-rate healthcare our country and our economy depend on. Conference, you also know that addressing the crisis in our mental health is equally as important to us as Liberals. That's why we are asking the Chancellor to use her coming budget to increase the tax on social media giants. That is money that could get people off mental health waiting lists, back to work, excelling at school. The social media giants, they need to be held accountable. But I don't think that goes far enough, because studies show the link between problematic smartphone use and poor mental health. We're talking anxiety and depression. Young people are telling us that they know it's harmful. Research shows that many have tried to find ways to cut down their own personal smartphone use. Phones are a distraction. Apps are built to be addictive. They offer relentless notifications, toxic role models, and platforms for the very worst kind of bullying and abuse. The classroom ought to offer a break to our young people from all of that. A bit of peace and quiet to learn, to focus, to properly connect with your teacher, your classmates, and with the lesson. It's time to enshrine the right of children to learn and teachers to teach in phone-free classrooms. Tackle the violence in our schools, the worst in the UK under the SNP. And we'd expand pupil support in every school as well. Because education, Conference, is the great leveller of our times. It is the ladder. It is the best investment we can make in our children's potential and our country's future. And Scotland deserves better. A realistic plan, Conference, for all of the questions facing Scottish education right now. The answer to none of them is a third decade in power for the SNP. Conference, we know the strain that pressures at home can also have on childhood learning. And one pressure that is all too commonplace in Scottish homes right now is the rising cost of living. Of all the outgoings that families face, just the cost of keeping the lights on and the radiators warm is among the hardest. That's why we've got a realistic plan to cut energy bills in half by 2035. Last week, Ed Davey was up with us at Edinburgh College talking about our plan with apprentices and with our brilliant candidate for Edinburgh Northern, Sanna Dijkstra Downey. Our plan means insulating cold Scottish homes, using our renewable energy to drive down household bills. And on top of that, we'd overhaul the rules so that companies which generate renewable power give back far more money to their local communities. There's another way we can bring down bills, and it has been staring us in the face since 2016. Conference, you reduce costs, you make life easier for business, and you grow our economy by unpicking the failures of Brexit and rebuilding our relationship with Europe. Conference, we would create a reciprocal youth mobility scheme so British employers can recruit workers they desperately need in hospitality, creative industries, construction and care. We'd rip up the red tape that is holding British firms back, especially small businesses, from selling into Europe, costing our economy billions of pounds in lost exports. We would tear down the Conservatives' trade barrier with a new bespoke customs union and conference. For our economy to grow, for our businesses to thrive, we must be striding and with confidence back upon the path towards the single market. And to grow our economy still further, friends, we have got to get Scotland moving again. Fixing our roads, fixing our public transport, fixing our ferries. The Scottish Government's ferries fiasco is a national embarrassment. It has cost us a fortune. Conference. Not a single SNP minister has ever had the decency to resign about it. Islanders, coastal communities, they all deserve compensation for the colossal disruption to their lives. But the Scottish Government has set up a scheme that excludes so many communities that are affected. Iona, Col, Tiree, Isla and Jura all get absolutely nothing. No compensation for Millport or Ardrossan, which has lost its link to Arran because the SNP government built a boat that doesn't fit their harbour. No compensation for Mull, where the toy shops of Tobermory are genuinely displaying signs which say that their toy ferries are more reliable than the real thing. That's a true story. The SNP just don't get it, friends. Ferry-dependent businesses deserve so much better. Conference, they deserve compensation, and the Scottish Government needs to pay up today. On top of that, Scottish Liberal Democrats will fix the ferries for good with a realistic plan. That's why today you, our members, have committed to introducing a ferries bill. New legislation to guarantee that vessels are replaced on time, to give communities a real say on how those ferries are run, and to take power away from Scottish ministers. So nobody ever has to endure a repeat of the SNP's ferry fiasco. I'm so proud of our newest MSP, Jamie Green, fighting for fair compensation for his constituents in the west of Scotland. Alan Reid grafting his way towards a victory in ferry-dependent Argyll and Bute. That, friends, that victory could be the surprise of the night, mark my words. Liam MacArthur and Beatrice Wishart fighting for a fair deal from Northlink and delivering millions more for their inter-island ferries in the Scottish budget. Emma MacDonald, our Shetland candidate, putting in place the building blocks required for inter-island tunnels that would be so transformational for those Northern Isles. Scottish Liberal Democrats, rolling up our sleeves, getting Scotland moving and fixing Scotland's lifeline links for good. Because, conferences, Liberal Democrats, we see the intrinsic potential in our country to expand, to compete, to make and to innovate. That is why our plan for economic growth hinges around delivering first-rate healthcare, helping you with the cost of living, getting Scottish education back to its best, and getting our country moving again. That is opportunity for everyone, no matter who you are or where you come from, because the Scottish Liberal Democrats are unashamedly the party of growth with fairness at its heart. Conference, the election is only 200 days away. It's so near you could practically reach out and touch it. So welcome to our surprise campaign boot camp on message discipline. The opportunity is such that we could be standing on the threshold of a historic breakthrough for our party across Scotland. But that breakthrough is not inevitable. We are going to have to work for every single vote. We're going to have to stick to our message like glue. That message is unapologetically positive. It speaks of our renewed confidence in our party, with more councillors, a record number of MPs, and a vision for change with fairness at its heart. While we have so much to offer the voting public, we have an ask of them as well. Conference, you are going to get sick of hearing me talk about a certain type of fruit. You're going to think I'm obsessed with peaches, because I will use every broadcast media, podcast, print media interview between this day and polling day to appeal for people to back us on that second peach regional ballot paper. It is all about the peach. To help get this message through to you, Conference, Willie Rennie has even offered to throw them at me in tins. Conference, we have built citadels in our constituencies because local people trust us to get stuff done. We are now poised again to win against the SNP in new seats across Scotland, particularly in Strathkelvin and seats like it. And now, for the first time in more than a decade, we're poised to break through on the regional lists as well. That matters so much. It could make the difference between a good night for our party and an absolutely stonking breakthrough of a night for our party. We haven't done this well enough before, if we're honest with ourselves. We will need to ask people again and again in our canvassing, at election hustings, in broadcasts and media interviews. We will remind them of it again and again. That is, you have 2 votes. And in seats across Scotland, we are poised to win against the SNP. But wherever you are, a vote for the Liberal Democrats on that second peach regional ballot paper will deliver you change with fairness at its heart, and a hard-working Lib Dem MSP. Claire McLaren, Duncan Dunlop, Morven May McCallum, Paul McGarry, Jane Alison Pickard, Daniel O'Malley, Ipe Chutervi. If you ask Conference for the peach vote on every doorstep, we can send each of them to the Scottish Parliament. And the more of them that we get over the line, the more we can get stuff done. And that's what we're here to do. That matters to the communities that we serve. Up in Tain and Easter Ross, Connie Ramsey has always been someone who gets stuck in. Well, she's a British judo champion and a medalist at the Commonwealth Games right here in Glasgow. What an inspiration that is to the young people that she now teaches. A campaigner determined to save her community's leisure centre from SNP cuts, a local businesswoman and a retained firefighter, and Conference, as of 3 weeks ago, the newest Scottish Liberal Democrat councillor. Oh dear, I can see the glint in the eye of our comms staff. Why do I have the distinct feeling that before polling day, while all of the cameras rolling, I'm going to be getting decked by a judo champion? Conference, Connie got more than double the vote of the SNP, triple that of Reform. It was the Scottish Liberal Democrats' best ever night in Tain, and it is a sign of things to come in the Highlands. For David Green, who can take that seat of Caithness, Sutherland and Ross from the SNP. For Andrew Baxter, whose popularity has already scared off Kate Forbes as his opponent in Skyloch Aber and Badenoch. And for Neil Alexander, who can charge through the middle as the nationalists face off against each other in Inverness and Nairn. It all goes to show that when we roll up our sleeves, when we get things done, it matters to people. That cuts through the disillusionment. And each of you who has joined me on the doors or been on the doors yourself will understand the truth of those words. Trust in politics and in public service is ebbing away like never before. It is incumbent on all of us to offer something better, to offer people hope and a realistic plan. So let me be abundantly clear about our approach to something that is dividing our communities right now. Conference, immigration is woven into Glasgow's history. Irish immigrants who came to work in the factories and mills, Highlanders forced south by the Highland clearances, and Italians fleeing famine. And from the turn of the century, people were diverted here by the Home Office because it had surplus housing. But right now, this city is being let down by a broken immigration system. It is the same across our country. People are frustrated. They feel let down by other parties. Conference, we see people coming over in dangerous, leaky boats, children drowning in the channel. It is awful. We see the millions being spent on asylum hotels. It is a complete waste of money. We see people kicking their heels in town centres with nothing much to do and nowhere to go, in fear of violence, in destitution, because that is what living on £7 a day means. It is so bleak. The question is, what do you do about it? Do you meet it with more conservative schemes like Rwanda that deported 4 people at a cost of £700 million? Do you meet it with Labour's ID cards, which will threaten our civil liberties, add to your tax bills, whilst doing nothing to tackle channel crossings? Do you meet it by doing deals with despots? Nigel Farage wants to send men, women and children back to Afghanistan to be murdered by the Taliban, paying them to do it. Conference, you do not. You put in place a realistic plan to get things done, to deliver change with fairness at its heart. So here it is. Right now, 90,000 men, women and children are stuck in the UK's asylum backlog. It is a backlog created deliberately by the outgoing Conservative government. It's time to declare the asylum backlog a national emergency. By so doing, we should invoke the Civil Contingencies Act, set up Nightingale processing centres to get through those applications, and employ 2,000 more caseworkers to get to the bottom of people's claims. By getting through that backlog the Tories created, we can close those asylum hotels. By working with our neighbours on the continent, we can tackle the gangs and the deadly crossings. And by letting people work while they are waiting for a decision, we can let them stand on their own 2 feet and contribute to the country that they have sought a safe harbour in, instead of sitting idle in a hotel. Why not let them work? Perhaps in local hospitality businesses struggling to keep the doors open because they can't find the staff. Conference, that is a humane, liberal solution. So, Conference, from Stranraer to Shetland, Skye to St Andrews, our message to everyone is this. We know you feel let down by the other parties. We think that Scotland deserves better than this. A realistic plan with change with fairness at its heart. Scotland has got so much going for it, but right now it just feels like our country simply isn't working. Household bills are soaring. The long wait to see your GP, the national embarrassment of our ferries scandal, and Scottish education just isn't what it used to be. People are tired and frustrated. They're right to be. The Scottish Liberal Democrats believe in fairness for everyone, no matter who you are or where you come from. That's why we've got that realistic plan to get things done. Delivering first-rate healthcare so you can see your GP, dentist or mental health care professional when you need them. Helping you with the cost of living, insulating cold Scottish homes and using Scottish renewable energy to drive down those household bills. Getting Scotland moving again by fixing our roads, our ferries and our public transport, and Scottish education back to its best. Expanding pupil support in every school and giving every child the very best start in life. Conference, Liberal Democrats are winning again, with more councillors, a record number of MPs and more to come. In many constituencies, we are on the verge of winning against the SNP, but wherever you are, every single vote for the Scottish Liberal Democrats on that second peach regional ballot paper will deliver change with fairness at its heart, because, Conference, Scotland deserves better, and with the Scottish Liberal Democrats, you can vote for it. Thank you.
No? No? No. Conference. We will shortly be proceeding with SC5, policy motion tackling misogyny and violence against women and girls. Now, as some of you may be aware, we do have a president and vice president of the federal election contest. We have allowed each of the candidates to choose a debate that they may wish to contribute in. And you'll see that they have all selected the same debate. So if we have enough time, we will hopefully at some point be hearing from each of our candidates contributing in this debate. So just so you know, that's why they're contributing. I would ask Christine Murdoch to stand by, and to propose this motion, I'd ask Wendy Chamberlain to the platform. Those continuing conversations, if you could do so outside, to be respectful to our speakers.
Good afternoon, conference. I'm getting my water ready because the reason why you didn't see me this morning is because sadly I am stuffed with the cold. But I'm delighted to be here, both moving and summating this motion. Conference, if you've had the opportunity to read through the motion before the debate has started, you'll see that it starts with a stark statement, but one that is true nonetheless. And that statement says that violence against women and girls is endemic within our society. And conference, if you don't believe me, you just need to look at the most recent crime statistics, which state that recorded crime data in June shows that levels of sexual crime are at the second highest level since 1971. Yep, that's right, 1971. Now, conference, I like to think that I'm still young. Some very nice people, members, sometimes tell me that I look still young. But the fact is that I am ticking the 46 to 50-year-old age bracket and have been doing so for some time. And anyone who's older than me who remembers the 1970s, I'm sure would not exactly describe it as an enlightened time. But this is where we are in relation to sexual crime against women and girls. Now, conference, I'm going to share something with you. I have been sexually assaulted. And I'm sure that there are a number of women in this room who have been too, or at the very least have experienced unwanted or inappropriate behaviour at the hands of men. Indeed, demeaning behaviour seems to be on the increase. I noted this morning Nigel Farage repeatedly calling Misha Hussein love on a podcast this week. Look, I don't share my experience for sympathy, or indeed because I want to tell you any more about the experience that I suffered. It's mine, it's private, and it's my choice in terms of who and whether I share additional content in relation to that assault. But simply, women and girls shouldn't have to share the gruesome details in order for this issue to get some attention, and more importantly, some action in order to tackle something that is an endemic now when my daughter is 20 years old, as it was when my mother was the same age as her. When Trump was elected for the first time, I remember watching the Women's March protests and the women in their pink hats. One of the placards remained with me, an older woman proclaiming, "I can't believe I'm having to march for this shit again." That's the reality of progress. It isn't linear, and it sometimes involves plenty of backward steps. Following the Me Too movement and the devastating murder of Sarah Everard and others, when Scottish Conference last moved a motion on this topic, it does feel like little has changed, both in terms of the behaviours or in terms of the criminal justice system and commitments by the SNP government that have yet to be fulfilled. So having laid out the context, let us now turn to the motion. I'm hugely grateful to parliamentary and party staff for helping pull this together, and the expertise of elected and other party colleagues for reviewing and adding to the motion. And I'm also grateful to Christine Jardine at a UK level for her work previously as our Women and Equality spokesperson in Westminster. And I'm sure some of those speakers who are due to speak will speak to some of those details accordingly. I'm pleased to see that some of the calls from previous conferences, such as our destitution fund, are now being taken forward by the Scottish Government in their funds to leave. And I've also been pleased to see financial institutions such as TSB recognised for their work in this area, establishing their own fund and recognising the financial constraints in coercive relationships. And I know that all my MP colleagues deal with child maintenance issues, and often children are long grown, but the payment of arrears continue to be withheld in order to exert control years after a relationship has ended. This must end. But there is much still to do despite the recommendations to the contrary. The decision by the Scottish Government not to bring forward legislation as recommended by Baroness Helena Kennedy to tackle misogyny, and the continued failure not to affirm the Istanbul Convention by the UK Government, who have themselves committed to reduce by half violence against women and girls, are frankly baffling. And this isn't just about the criminal justice system, although there is much to be done there. As a former police officer, continued reports, both from Scotland and elsewhere, in relation to the prejudiced behaviour and actions of those entrusted to wear the uniform and enforce our laws sadden and anger me. And then if we look at schools, reports that over 13,000 school children in Scotland across 37 schools found that schoolboys, a quarter of schoolboys, thought that sexual harassment didn't apply if their behaviour was meant as a joke, and half of boys surveyed thought there were more things that boys were better at than girls, shows that challenging ingrained attitudes remains a huge challenge. I remember going to see my teenage son, or coming into his room one night when he was on the computer, and asking what he thought of Andrew Tate. And he said he thought he was a twat. And I said, oh, that's great. But as I was leaving the door, I turned round to him and said, he said, Mum, what would you have said if I had said something else? Or that I'd liked him? And I said, well, I'd have sat down and I'd tried to understand where it was you were coming from. And he said, no, Mum, you would have just had a rant. And he was probably right about that. But I think this really does demonstrate that we need men and boys engaged in this debate too. Maybe those politicians who sometimes, or those in the public eye, who talk about themselves as fathers of daughters, and that is what has been needed to get them involved in this debate, needs to be taking responsibility alongside fathers of sons. And we should stop those kind of platitudes anyway, because surely being human beings should be part of why we need to tackle this issue. I'm really pleased to see in the motion work in relation to the Online Safety Act. It's great to see my colleague from Westminster, Victoria Collins, here today, but it really does demonstrate when we're looking at schools how important it is that we ensure that young people don't remain in echo chambers, and the importance of looking at the Online Safety Act now has passed. It is something that needs to be engaged with and updated on an ongoing basis. And I'm also pleased that the motion recognises that our governments, both Scottish and UK, have a role to play together to work together to tackle this issue, because we cannot get away from the fact that they all interact with one another. So the challenge remains, conference, but this motion brings forward tangible proposals to tackle some of the most harmful behaviours developed with the practical experience and knowledge of many of the candidates standing for the Scottish Liberal Democrats in May. Please, conference, pass this motion today, but also do everything you can in order to elect Scottish Liberal Democrats next year and ensure that as much of this motion that can be actioned is. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Prue Bray to stand by, and I call Christine Murdoch to the platform.
Thank you, conference, and thank you, Wendy, and all involved in bringing this motion to conference. I'm speaking from the heart today with the support of my current family. I'm a survivor of domestic abuse and sexual abuse. My former husband is now serving a prison sentence for his abuse not just of me, not just of one other partner, but 3 other women and 2 children. My abuse is now what is called historic, but I was still able to go through the justice system, but I didn't know that. And it was only because one of his other survivors was brave enough to go to the police and make a complaint that I too was allowed my day in court and receive justice. You have no idea how empowering it is to have 15 of your peers unanimously believe your testimony. I had a very good experience of the justice system, right from the first phone call from the police, and who was from Fife, Wendy. Sadly, that is not true for everyone. We have all heard the reports of misogyny in Police Scotland. All victims of crime deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. That should not be dependent on which police officer you are lucky to speak to or meet when you finally pluck up the courage to seek justice. While we need institutional change, there is something that each and every one of us here can do. If you suspect anyone of suffering abuse of any kind, please ask them. They may fob you off to begin with, but you have no idea how much of a difference that can make, because you're no longer suffering alone. I'm extremely grateful to two people. The male colleague who'd noticed that something was wrong and encouraged me to speak to my mother. He even arranged for me to go home early from work that day so that I could do just that. I never returned to my matrimonial home. I was fortunate I was able to move back with my parents until I had alternative accommodation. Not everyone is so lucky, which is why we need to update the Matrimonial Homes Act. I'm also grateful to the woman who was brave enough to go to the police and start the chain of events which led to a conviction. If you're a survivor of abuse, might you be that brave person which will help achieve justice for yourself and others. Earlier we heard we have a right to be safe when out and about at night. Conference, we all have a right to be safe in our own homes. And if sadly we are not, then we deserve to be treated with dignity and respect as we seek the safety we all deserve. I urge you from the bottom of my heart to support this motion.
Thank you. I call Prue Bray to the platform, and I ask Karen Lindsay to stand by.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Can I start by thanking you for giving the candidates for President the opportunity to speak in one of your debates. So I'm a trustee of a charity called Kaleidoscopic UK, and its purpose is to reduce domestic abuse and domestic violence. And almost everyone else involved with the charity is a survivor of domestic violence, and I am one of the lucky ones who has never experienced it. And that's why I wanted to speak on this motion particularly. Tackling domestic violence is a really important component of tackling violence against women and girls, as this motion recognises. But misogyny and violence against women is not confined to domestic settings. I am willing to bet that every woman in this room, including any trans women, has felt fear of being attacked at some point in their lives, or worse, has actually been attacked. The impact of this fear is something that many men struggle to understand, although gay men perhaps do, given that homophobic attacks are sadly also a feature of our society. I know not all men are violent or misogynistic, but too many men are, including, unfortunately, some within this party, as I have seen through my involvement with internal complaints over the years. So, I am sick of being told how to say stay safe. I'm sick of being told that women shouldn't go out at night or alone, that we should dress differently, that we shouldn't drink alcohol, that we should avoid confrontation, or should stick to women's spaces, and on and on and on. Women's behaviour is not the problem. The problem is men's behaviour. So men have a role in sorting it out. This very excellent comprehensive motion calling for action from the Scottish and the UK governments, councils, schools and so on, has one omission. It fails to mention an organisation that specifically aims to get men to take responsibility for tackling misogyny and violence against women and girls. You see this badge I'm wearing? It's the emblem of the White Ribbon campaign. And White Ribbon is a UK-wide organisation, and you can find White Ribbon Scotland online. The council I'm on, which is in Berkshire, has signed up to White Ribbon, and senior male officers and councillors are responsible for promoting its aims. I would urge you to find out about it. But more than that, I would ask every man here who has not already done so to start to make a difference by going to the White Ribbon Scotland website today and pledging never to commit, condone or remain silent about violence against women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Jane Alison Pickard to stand by, and I call Karen Lindsay to the platform.
Conference, about 15 years ago, it started to feel like we were really getting somewhere at last on women's rights and tackling violence against women and girls. Jo Swinson, Lynn Featherstone, Lindsay Northover, our ministers were never off the telly talking about things like gender stereotyping, body image, stopping FGM, improving women's and girls' lives abroad. And they delivered on these things. There was the Girls' Summit in London, and even Conservative cabinet ministers talked about the need to stop domestic abuse and sexual violence. But it's all gone very badly wrong in the past few years. And this motion outlines some of the things we must do to sort things out. I want to make 3 points. I'm particularly pleased to see us reaffirm and strengthen our support for women who have experienced domestic abuse in the housing system, an idea I first brought to conference as housing spokesperson in 2019. Too often, the trauma suffered by victims of domestic abuse is exacerbated when they are forced to leave their homes, often with their children. It is not acceptable that they should be forced into this situation. So you're very vulnerable, traumatised individuals, the vast majority of whom are women, having to declare themselves as homeless. That means they're put in temporary accommodation, perhaps for short periods, into bed and breakfast accommodation with no cooking facilities, where they don't have the comfort of having their own things around them, where the children don't have their toys. They are perhaps in an unfamiliar area far away from their support networks, and they could get moved at any time to different temporary accommodation. That instability and insecurity piling even more distress onto them. And then they deal with staff and social housing providers who are not trained in supporting them, often having to tell their stories multiple times, sometimes in open plan offices. This has to stop. Secondly, whenever we talk about violence against women and girls, I think we need to call out the way in which this issue has been weaponised by the far right. In August, the End Violence Against Women Coalition called this out, saying, spreading an inaccurate picture of violence against women and girls in the UK allows the people, overwhelmingly men, from all walks of life who harm women and girls to hide behind racial stereotypes and scapegoating. We reject the far right's racist lies about protecting women and girls. They're not defenders of women. They exploit violence of women against women to fuel hate and division. We cannot allow rich white men, many of whom have never lifted a finger to do anything for women's rights in their lives, use women's safety to demonise and target vulnerable refugees and other people of colour and trans women. Almost all women who experience men's violence do so from someone in their family, workplace or school. And my final point is about the use of AI, and which is rife in schools, apparently, and the rich, powerful men who run online platforms not giving a hoot about how photos of women and girls posted on their social medias can be stolen and turned into horrific images of sexual violence. The motion touches on online abuse, and we must be very clear that if the tech bros won't tackle this, they need to be forced to.
Thank you. Thank you. Could I ask Victoria Collins MP to stand by, and I call Jane Alison Pickard to the platform.
Thank you, Conference. I would like to support this motion and note within it the call to have holistic strategies across society to ensure women and girls can live freely from coercive violence and misogyny. Legislation is part of the solution, and existing legislation will play its part as well. I applaud this motion in recognising that the Domestic Abuse Act, if properly implemented and resourced, will play a critical role in this effort. And I understand this legislation already covers misogyny in the home, as noted by the Scottish Human Rights Commission. But what happens behind closed doors is too often reinforced by background values and norms in society. New legislation is an important frame for what is acceptable to society, yet so is the importance of public information and education beyond the criminal justice system to reinforce and co-opt society as a whole to the work required to recognise and eliminate misogyny. Firstly, we need to have clarity to implement workable legislation against abusive and criminal misogynist behaviour. And we should, as Liberals, make clear we are not banning rude, sexist or unpleasant opinions, however distasteful or difficult those may be. Creative public campaigns using role models of all ages and genders and identifying what this public offence is and what it isn't is a critical part of this work and will be a powerful part of the toolkit in creating societal change as laws. In this way, we Liberals can signal that we will tolerate and defend the right to opinions we may not agree with, whilst drawing a line on behaviour that infringes the rights and freedoms of others. The fight against misogyny is pressing. To acknowledge a recent research from Amnesty evidencing that 70% of Generation Z have experienced or witnessed misogyny online, we cannot draw a line between online and other media or social interactions. We all exist between these spheres, and societal norms are formed and reinforced fluidly between these spaces. The call for work on the Online Safety Act will fulfil the need for consistent scrutiny in a fast-changing environment. A holistic approach would see the state be ambitious in encouraging and harnessing community and work-based groups, intergenerational mentoring and peer-to-peer influencing, enabling all of us in a common goal to be proud allies of women and girls, reinforcing the standards of conduct online and in real life that the majority of us agree on and aspire to. So this work is multifaceted and it's multi-generational. But let's get on with it. I commend the motion to the conference.
Thank you. Could I ask Cameron Hussein to stand by, and I call Victoria Collins to the platform.
Thank you very much, and I congratulate the Scottish Liberal Democrats for securing or pushing this motion because it's such important work, and also I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak on this. I'd really like to focus on the online world particularly because that's something I've been campaigning a lot on. The terrible truth is that violence against women and girls pervades our streets and homes and online, where it multiplies and where it's permanent and where it reaches our daughters in their bedrooms. It's awful that Police Scotland recorded over 60,000 incidents of domestic abuse, the third highest level on record. And I also worry daily about the untold stories with misogyny and violence that starts, grows, festers and acts out online. As the Liberal Democrat spokesperson for technology, I believed it was vital to get young women's voices brought to the UK Parliament and heard by decision makers. And so I've been leading a Safe Screens listening tour, visiting schools, sixth formers, and expanding that to other MPs. And what young women tell me is harrowing. They talk about the algorithm content that normalises misogyny and violence against women, and they see the behaviour change in their male classmates. They raise the fear of deep fakes driven by the rise in AI, which has been documented already by the NSPCC against children. I've heard of coordinated harassment campaigns that follow them from platform to platform. And I've heard young women tell me about the content that indeed questions their worth every day. That's why it's so disappointing to hear the recent decision not to bring forward a dedicated law to tackle misogyny in the Scottish Parliament, as recommended by Baroness Helena Kennedy, KC. I call on this conference to support this motion, and I highlight particularly the calls on the UK Government to convene a cross-party committee to scrutinise the rollout of the Online Safety Act, which is still failing young people, and highlighted by Molly Rose Foundation, NSPCC. And I also support the motion which calls for the Scottish and UK governments to work together to identify those gaps in legislation and legal system which can enable a perpetrator of domestic abuse to continue to exert control over a survivor. The importance of working cross-party and with stakeholders and reporting that annually to both parliaments. We must continue to work together. And that work highlights to me the importance of representation. We all have a role to play, but I'm proud that we now have the most diverse parliament in the UK, with 40%, or the UK parliament's ever had, with 40% representation. And I believe that the Scottish Parliament stands even stronger at 45%. However, we have so much more work to do, including representation from trans and non-binary. Most importantly, with representation from across backgrounds and experiences, standing up to protect women and girls wherever they are, online or offline. The technology has changed, the platforms are new, but the fight is the same for women's safety, dignity and equality. As Liberal Democrats, we have never shied away from this fight, so I urge you to support this motion, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because every day that we delay, more women and girls will suffer. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we have our next speaker, just wanted to make a quick note, a housekeeping note that's been sent to me. It's just to tell candidates for the Scottish Parliament elections that in the room next door there is photographs available with the leader, which will be available for the next 30 minutes. So at the conclusion of this debate, you'll still be able to take that opportunity. So can I ask to stand by Stephen Hart, and can I call Cameron Hussain to the platform? Thank you.
Friends, misogyny isn't just a political issue. It's a profound human tragedy that tears the very fabric of our society. As I stand before you, seeking to be elected Vice President of the Liberal Democrats, I carry with me the haunting echoes of so many women who have been overlooked, belittled, or silenced for far too long. Friends, I've sat with friends, colleagues, campaigners who've shared with me the stories of harassment, exclusion, and those invisible walls that still confine women to modern Britain. These aren't just stories, they're cries for justice. And they demand not just leadership, but a fierce, unyielding commitment to change. The heartbreaking truth is that far too many women live in the shadow of fear, reshaping their days, curtailing their freedoms, just to feel safe. And across the UK, discrimination eats away at women's confidence and crushes their dreams. Only recently, the Panorama programme exposed the Metropolitan Police and was a stark reminder to all of us of what happens when institutions sadly look away. That is why I say it clear, tackling misogyny isn't a side issue. It's a beating heart of what it means to be a Liberal Democrat. And my promise is simple: to fight for gender equality at every level of our party, to build genuine roots to power through mentorship and sponsorship, to confront misogyny wherever we find it, whether that's in person or online, to ensure the principles of Liberal Democrat women in our policies, campaigns, and vision, and to speak on issues that matter. Violence against women and girls, soaring childcare costs, the gender pay gap. These are issues that we need to stand up for. And as your Vice President, I will be the shield against misogyny in every form. Together, friends, let's forge a movement that declares to women across Britain, your struggle is our struggle. Your voice echoes in our halls. And your tomorrow is a brighter future we'll build side by side. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, just before you come up, this is going to be my last conference as the chair of conference. I'm going to mess with things a little bit. I've received 3 excellence cards but come in late after I sort of planned the debate. So what I'm going to ask is that those three speakers would speak for a minute to give you the opportunity, because they are excellent cards. So I want to give you that opportunity. So that would be Oda Baker-Calder, Bruce Wilson and Michael Turvey, all to stand by to give you that opportunity. And then after that, it would be Lynn McMillan, but that would be a 3-minute speech. But those three cards I'd like to give a minute, just because I think they are excellent and worthy of being heard by the conference. So I call Stephen Hart to the platform.
Thank you, Paul. And before anything, thank you, Paul, for being an excellent conference convener and making sure voices have been heard across this party for all your years. Thank you, Paul. And thank you, Wendy, for bringing this. As Wendy said and as Prue said, this isn't a women's issue. This isn't an issue for fathers. This has to be an issue for us all. And you know, we all, as men, it is humbling and terrifying as a man to think this is our problem, this is us, this is me. Hopefully I'm not doing this, but this is me and mine doing this. And this is terrifying. As Karen said, it's been galling to see the hard right use this issue. Wasn't it great this week to see Daisy Cooper take on Stephen Yaxley Lennon? Got a posh name. The man who feels he can self-define as Tommy Robinson, because only he can self-define, remember. And Daisy went for him, and that was great, and more power to it. Because they're, as Karen says, weaponising this issue. Do you think he cares about this issue? Do you think if he was reading Wendy's motion, what he would say? He would dismiss it as woke nonsense, wouldn't he? It's a red flag conference. If you hear anybody criticising something for being woke, that's a red flag. Don't trust that person. So the hard right and the vile press that's backing them up in the campaign against the immigrants is not protecting women and girls. It's purely pushing bigotry. And they're not alone. We also know that the anti-trans voices that are so amplified by the press, so amplified by this bloody Labour government, are also using violence against women and girls to push their own bigotry. And sadly, we have to share our party spaces with such voices. I hope we get to a day where party people won't feel they have to play all sides on this, won't feel that they have to watch what they say, that we can call this out, call out people, anti-immigrant voices, anti-trans voices who weaponise this issue, because it's only by treating this issue seriously that we will ever do anything about it. Thank you, conference.
Thank you. I call for the first of our interventions, and if I can ask for the other speakers to be ready to stand by. So I call Obi Baker-Calder, and then Bruce Wilson, and then Michael Turvey.
Thank you. I was not meant to speak, but I decided to speak anyway. First of all, I've been also a victim of abuse during my first relationship, and I know that you feel that you can trust nobody when it's happening to you. So last year, I brought a motion in council to tackle misogyny in local authority. But so far, after a year, there is still no safeguarding and true justice for staff and elected member who's suffering daily microaggression and misogyny in the council. If there is already a problem for those who take the decision, like councillors, like MP, like MSPs, are already making act of misogyny, how we want to be sure that we're getting viable changes when those who nod but don't walk the walk. So I'm working for the moment on a cross-party group with Engender on violence against women in local authorities, and the result will be published soon this year. And I'm sure that the result will be shocking for a lot of us, but not so shocking for a lot of women in this room. And I'm pleased to get that this motion is going on, and I hope that you can support it, but also not thinking about only domestic abuse, but all the things that we're getting in women's society about misogyny, even microaggression. Thank you.
Thank you. So I do appreciate that, such a short intervention. I now call Bruce Wilson to the platform and ask Michael Turvey to stand by.
Good afternoon, conference. Some really moving speeches there. You know, as a male, I don't have much to say when it comes to misogyny, but I've spent the past 6 years working in tech with girls, and a lot of this debate has focused on women. But the numbers of girls who are victims of child sexual abuse is massive. The NCA, the National Crime Agency, estimates the number of people who are a danger to children is between 710 and 840,000 people, so over 1% of the UK population. If I take this room, at least 2 people could potentially be dangerous to children. We are losing the battle to protect our young girls because of the change in end-to-end encryption platforms like the big tech companies have imposed. And they're not doing it because they're somehow misogynists. They're doing it to save money. Because if they can encrypt things, they can not say they need to be held accountable for the abuse that takes place on their platforms. Meta put Facebook Messenger behind an end-to-end encryption wall. Overnight, the US charity, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, lost virtually all its reports on child sex abuse being shared globally. We need to be better as a party about having these discussions on that balance between individual freedoms and right to privacy and tackling child abuse, especially for our young girls.
Thank you, Bruce. I call Michael Turby to the platform and I ask Lynn McMillan to stand by.
Conference, good afternoon. I didn't plan to speak on this motion, but my conscience was needled by some of the speakers who said that men should be stepping up, and they should be stepping up. Now, when I graduated from university, I volunteered with a charity called Victim Support, and I was in the division that supported people through court. And I have to say, just meeting some of the victims of domestic abuse and indeed seeing people actually flee the court because they couldn't face their abusers was genuinely harrowing, and it sticks with me to this day. There was an occasion where I had the opportunity to have some impact on that. When I lived in Chester, there was somebody being abused in the street outside by their boyfriend, so-called. And I actually had a ruptured Achilles at the time, so I couldn't walk to go out and intervene personally. But I made very copious notes and called the police and gave them real-time account of what was going on. That person went to jail for 3 months based on that testimony. It wasn't long enough, but it was all the court could do. More recently, we've had the experience of a victim of a sexual assault turn up on our doorstep. And I have to say the behaviour of the police on that occasion was woeful. Ipe and I had them in our kitchen interrogating this young girl, and they were focused on trying to get a conviction for drunk driving. But I can tell you that both of us held the police to account, and we told them on no certain terms that if they wanted to carry on the line of question they were carrying on, they weren't welcome to stay in the house, and they should be focusing on the welfare of the individual.
Thank you, Michael. Draw your remarks to close.
So I guess my encouragement really is just to everybody out there, whether you're big, ugly and hairy like me or whatever, please do step up in these circumstances. Be a friend, be an ally, and support people in difficult situations.
Thank you. I call Lynn McMillan to the platform and ask Wendy Chamberlain to stand by to submit the motion.
Thank you, Paul. I promise I will be brief. Good afternoon, Conference. I just wanted to draw Conference's attention to something I saw on the BBC's website a couple of days ago, which some of you may have seen. This is something that's happening in Scotland right now. A GP in the Highlands has been charged with communications offences after he called Ellie Wilson a manipulative liar, a slut and a hippo on X. In 2022, this GP's son was convicted of raping Miss Wilson, who has since become a campaigner for survivors of male sexual violence. The son was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Rape Crisis Scotland has complained to the GMC twice about the doctor's conduct, but he is still able to see patients in Scotland, in NHS Highland. This is an appalling indictment of somebody in a position of authority who is behaving in an utterly misogynistic manner. and I'm very glad I'm not one of his patients. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Wendy Chamberlain to the platform to make the motion.
How long do I have, Paul? 3 minutes. Thank you, conference. What a well-subscribed debate. I'm really pleased to hear that we care. And I'm very pleased to see the number of men who care too, both for being here in the room but also contributing to the debate. I'm conscious sometimes as women we accuse you of mansplaining. We do want you to come forward, we do want you to speak up, and we do want you to call other men to account. So many experiences there, Christine, thank you for coming forward and speaking of your experience. I think it brought the whole room to silence, and I'm so glad that you had the opportunity to have your day in court, and also important in relation to the Matrimonial Homes Act. Prue, delighted to have you here and speaking here, talking about your work in relation to domestic abuse, and also talking about White Ribbon Scotland as well, something that all men here in the room and elsewhere can very easily do, and certainly something we should be looking at as we run up to to the elections in May. Karen, I thought you properly brought to life the optimism that Lib Dem women in government brought, and the importance and impact of children in relation to domestic abuse. All we are doing is entrenching inequality and unfairness and poor behaviours by not ensuring that women are looked after. And yes, I entirely agree in relation to the right. I think we just remember that now independent James McMurdoch had a conviction for assaulting his partner before he became a Reform MP. I think that tells you everything you need to know. Jane, thank you for recognising the need for a holistic approach and for reminding us that we need to do so in a liberal way. Victoria, your work on the online safety and how you've tried to bring everybody together and find the way forward has been very inspiring, particularly for a new MP. But it's quite clear that we need to do more in this space. And in fact, we will always need to do more, because simply the online safety space is something that's going to continue to evolve as technology does. And it's quite clear that we can't trust the big data companies to do that for us. Cameron, thank you also for contributing. Thank you for talking about the Met Police investigation carried out by the BBC, but also about how important it is to tackle this so that we can include women in public life. It depresses me that the first time that we saw more than 650 women MPs ever elected was at the election last year. I think that tells us how much more we need to do. Stephen, yes, you're right, it's an issue for us all. Ode, thank you for the work you've done in Council. Bruce, those are some quite terrifying statistics. It is quite clear that we need to upskill legislators so that when we are passing legislation, we understand the unintended consequences that are there. And Michael, thank you for what you and Yippee did for that victim of domestic abuse. And finally, Lynn, yes, the reality is in the case of Ellie Wilson, we actually saw a conviction. The reality is very few happen. But the fact that the perpetrator of the crime against Ellie, his father, feels that he can continue to wage a war, a psychological war on social media, tells us that there is much to do about the entrenched attitudes that we still have. I'm very proud to be standing here today at conference and hearing the support for the motion. I very much hope it passes. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that speaks for itself that that's probably the most cards during a debate I think I've ever received, and I can't believe that I'm actually saying we managed to call all the speakers, which is quite remarkable. Now ask if for the voting, so those in favour of this motion, please show your voting cards. Thank you. And now can I ask to see those against? And is overwhelmingly carried and passed. My thanks to my aide Jackie Bell, for all the other people that helped me with running during that debate, and I now pass the chair to Jenny Lang. And thank you for all the speakers who contributed in that debate. Thank you.
Right, conference, we are getting into the nuts and bolts. We have emergency motion 1, which you should have in your daily bulletin, which is, let me get it, The opposing Labour's digital ID scheme should be right here. Can I ask Bruce Wilson to stand by, and I'll call Christine Jardine MP from Edinburgh West to move the motion.
Hi. I'm a last-minute replacement for Alistair Carmichael, who sent his apologies. This motion's quite simple, although we have been here before with this Labour government, and no doubt we'll be here again. The arguments against the ID scheme for me are all liberal, entirely liberal. It's about the relationship between the citizen and the state. We have never been a papers, please society, and I hope we never become one, because no one should have to prove anything to the government about who they are unless there is a need, a clear need for them to do it. We also know that the people most likely to be asked to prove who they are from the BAME background. As with Stop and Search, we've seen it clearly. And other disadvantaged groups will be the same. Digital ID is divisive. Now, Keir Starmer will tell you that it's necessary to combat what he calls illegal immigration, but that's disingenuous. We already have a black economy where people work illegally. This won't change that. If you want to stop small boat crossings, then you have to offer people safe and legal routes to do it. We cannot trust this government or any other one to keep our data safe. Just weeks ago, we learned that the data of 18,000 asylum seekers who'd worked with us in Afghanistan had been published by mistake, and the government had then covered it up. A few years ago, the name and address of every single person working for the police service of Northern Ireland was published, and some people had to go back to checking under their cars before they used them, and others had to move out of their homes. Okay, so those are the Liberal arguments. There's one other thing. It will be massively expensive, almost certainly running to billions of pounds. Some estimates put it between 11 billion and 18 billion. We can't afford to help old people pay their winter heating bills, but we can afford this? I think not. And what about a voluntary scheme, I hear people say? Wouldn't that be awfully useful? Well, yes, but already you're seeing mission creep in Labour's plans, and it wouldn't stay voluntary for long. Once you've spent all that money and it's making no difference, the argument comes, well, it would work if everybody did it, so let's make it compulsory. A voluntary scheme is just a backdoor to a mandatory one. And then people will say, but other European countries have it. Other European countries also have all sorts of protections, including written constitutions guaranteeing individual rights. We have few of these, and the government is now proposing watering down some of the ones in the Human Rights Act. And just pause for a moment and think what a reform government might use this for if they were in power. For sending people back who have indefinite leave to remain, or worse? What if they start telling people that their ID cards have to have their sex at birth on them? How does that sit with our liberal principles if we support it? What about other intrusions? I don't need the government to have a card to tell them who I am. I already have a card that they can use. It's called a national insurance card, and it has my national insurance number on it. If any government department wants to check who I am, they just have to ask, and I'll tell them. I'll give them my number, and they'll know exactly who I am. Or if they want photographic ID, they've got my passport or my driving license. This would be prohibitively expensive. It would hit other things which are frankly more important. It's totally unnecessary and a breach of our liberal principles and our civil liberties. So please, conference, send the idea of ID, however it's done, digital or analogue, back to where it belongs, in the Labour coffers. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Sally Pattle to stand by, and I'll call Bruce Wilson to speak against the motion.
Thank you, Christine, for that excellent introduction to the debate. One of the great things about our party is we can disagree politely. And I am going to speak against this motion because whilst I believe in 2003, when we were having these discussions about ID cards before, it was very relevant. That was 4 years before the advent of the iPhone. And over the past 25 years, most of us have subscribed at one time to social media platforms that you have, if you ever check the terms and conditions, given a lot of information to already. In terms of the straw man objection that a future government could do something untowards, the absence of some kind of digital ID is not going to protect us should that happen. Only a vigorous democracy will protect us. If we want to embrace the advantages that technology can bring, we need to acknowledge that the phones that the vast majority of us carry in our pockets protect our bank details, protect our personal family photos, protect our email, protect most of our online life, are incredibly secure. And if we look at examples from 25 of the 27 EU member states, they all have some kind of digital ID form. And Switzerland, which has just rolled out a new form of digital ID, means that you own your data on your device, encrypted. So you only have to share the data that you want to share. It's not held in a central government database. When we look at the US tech firms, I am more comfortable with a democracy with accountability so that if there is data breaches in things like Afghan interpreters, government can be held to account, as opposed to a US tech firm that can sell your data as it sees fit. When we put in safeguards for elderly people, we can do it in a way either whereby they're upskilled to using digital ID cards or supported in that transition. When we talk about that false dichotomy of, oh, are we going to invest in public services or are we going to invest in digital ID? Well, that's entirely the wrong precedent to set. How are we going to enable public services in the future where, to do it cheaper and more effectively, you can quickly validate your GP or your employment from your device? I think it's important to acknowledge that the European Union is rolling this out so that every country can interpret itself across different ID cards so that you can work freely across the EU. Conference, this is not the argument of 20 years ago. This is the 21st century where we've already given away information, but now you've got a chance to bring that information back into your control. Conference, I urge you to object to this motion and take this motion down forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Can I ask Donald Harley to stand by and now call Sally Pattle from West Lothian to speak for the motion?
Oh, Bruce, I really hate opposing you, but you're wrong. So I'm Sally Pattle. I am here to speak in favour of the motion. I am so pleased that this was chosen as an emergency motion. I've got several reasons, and I will get to the fine detail. But first of all, I just have to say that this one just gives me the ick factor. Don't mandate something that is patently unnecessary. Don't tell me I have to have an ID card. I am a Liberal Democrat. I will oppose that. There is no reason for this to become mandatory. I would like to, I think, the most serious point that has been made by others, and I hope will be made by people after me as well, is that this is going to lead to further digital exclusion. And I'm not going to use the phrase vulnerable people because they're not vulnerable. I was told that when they closed our last bank branch in Linlithgow, I was told that the only people this was going to affect was a small number of vulnerable people. Well, it doesn't. I know many people, myself included as a business owner, who need a bank branch because we have to do things in person. And this is going down the same road. Now, we may one day live in Bruce's brave new world where everything is online and we've all got smart devices, but we are nowhere near that yet. We're not just talking about the fact that in Linlithgow, 14 miles away from the centre of Edinburgh, we have rubbish broadband. We're talking about the fact that a lot of people are not comfortable with online, nor should they have to be. We are decades away from that, so we should be having this debate in decades to come. Okay, we're not going to limit people, basically, to live fully in life in the UK. As Christina said, we've already got a form of national ID. We've got national insurance numbers. What more do you want from us? They also say it's in part to tackle illegal immigration, but I'm afraid that the black economy is going to carry on just as merrily as it is at the moment. Services such as hospitality and building are not going to check that their workers are abiding by this. It's also very light on detail. We've got no information on the timeline or the specifics, just a blanket, we are doing this and it's going to fix everything. The only thing that we do know at this point is that it's going to cost millions and millions of pounds. And so my final point, because I've got no idea what time we're on at the moment, is that as a local... Oh, is that the thing? I just thought that was broken. Thank you. I'm fine. Okay, so the final thing, as a local councillor, we are facing real problems, okay? We are facing millions of pounds worth of shortfall just in West Lothian, and it is the same in every local authority across Scotland, oh now it's gone red, and the UK. So please, instead of wasting millions on a scheme that probably won't work, can we just have the money to deliver the public services that we all deserve? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally. Can I ask Neil Casey to stand by? And I now call Donald Harley from South Lanarkshire, who is speaking against the motion.
Good afternoon, conference. Donald Harley, South Lanarkshire, first-time speaker. Speaking to oppose the motion, I think it's a mistake to characterise the ID scheme as an imposition or an infringement, rather than the opportunity and benefit it represents. We consider ourselves a European party, yet here we are tilting at windmills against European norms. It works perfectly fine in every other nation across Europe, where it creates great benefits, easing travel. If you're travelling within the Schengen zone, you wave your ID card, you're through. It's bureaucracy low. If you go to any great cultural attraction in the European Union, you show your ID card. You probably get a substantial discount, as I did across Spain, following my friend who had a German residence card through. It's a great thing. And as my colleague here already said, how many organisations have already got your data, from social media to banks to the government, in 101 different ways already? That pass is sold, okay? And you have to show ID for any number of things in this country already. It's required under the money laundering regulations. It's required when you take out a mortgage, when you take out a bank loan, when you take out any investment. So why are you rootling around in your filing cabinet for a dog-eared gas bill rather than something that's a gold standard and works well and it will be accepted universally? It's time to move on. As for older people struggling with this, sorry, I'm in my 7th decade of life. I don't think it's a problem. Everybody I know has a mobile phone. I cannot see that this is going to present the challenge that's been characterised as. So, let's move forward to a more constructive approach. If there are problems with the introduction of this, we should be doing it in a constructive way and seeking to mitigate and not oppose ideologically. Support the scheme, oppose the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Sanna Dykstra-Downey to stand by to make the motion? I'm really sorry because it's been pretty packed and I'm not been able to take everyone. And I'll call Neil Casey, our policy convener, to speak for the motion as a whole.
Thank you. I'm here to speak for the motion. I am old enough to remember this ID scheme or something similar, albeit a bit more analogue, under New Labour, and signed the No to ID petitions at the time. This is a big part of why I'm a Liberal Democrat today, that in Iraq. And for me, the motive matters here. This scheme isn't being brought in to make our lives easier. It isn't being brought in to lower bureaucracy. It's being brought in to make vulnerable people's lives more difficult. And when you do that, that infects everything in the design of the system. Every decision point that whoever is building the system comes to will refer back to the guiding principles of what set it up. and that is to make it easier to identify immigrants. And that's a problem for me. Sally referred to the fact that we haven't even solved rural broadband yet, and yet we want to move to this wholly digital scheme. That's another problem. Other speakers have raised the point about the fact that these large tech companies already have our data. Well, Apple may have my data, but I chose to do that. I haven't chosen for the government to have all this data that I don't want them to have. And Apple, point blank, refuses to give that data to the government. They've recently, I think the government recently dropped their request or their court action to try and force Apple to give them your data. So for those reasons, I urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Can I now call Sana Dykstra-Downey to summate on the motion, and then after that we will move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Conference. This is the wrong scheme at the wrong time, being proposed for the wrong reasons. Thank you to all of the speakers, and isn't it great that we have a debate where we actually disagree with each other? Somebody particularly excited about that over here. Christine spoke about the relationship between the citizen and state. She made both a liberal argument for opposing the scheme, but also highlighted the potentially huge cost of the scheme. Bruce, thank you for disagreeing politely. You spoke about how technology moved on and talked about how many of us do hand over our data to companies already, but that is, as Neil just pointed out, on a voluntary basis. Sally, I think that was maybe the first time that the ick factor was said on this stage. Really enjoyed that. You highlighted the potential for digital exclusion and also highlighted the cost of this scheme and how that money could be spent much better by providing better services for people. Donald, you talked about that this is not an infringement but an opportunity, and you talked about how other European countries have already got schemes like this. But again, in many cases, these are not mandatory schemes, they are voluntary. Neil, you highlighted how the scheme would impact on vulnerable people. And you made the point again that when we hand over our data, we choose to do so. And this scheme is not voluntary, it would be mandatory. As liberals, we should always have a healthy suspicion of government, especially when it seeks more powers. A healthy skepticism of the state when it instructs us to do things without choice. And as liberals, we should stand firm that we are not servants of government. Instead, we should remember that the government is the servant of people. And whatever their stated reasoning now, the true intentions of this government were made clear by Scottish MP and Digital Minister Ian Murray when he said the number of applications this could be used for are limitless. Limitless application, Conference. That is what we face. I ask you to say no. No to this further intrusion. No to this further power grabbing. No to this honeypot of data for hackers. No to this grotesque use of public money when our public services are in such decline. I ask you to vote for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sana. And it's always good to have a divisive debate. We're now going to move to the vote. Can I see those who are in favour of emergency motion 1? And can I see any against? So maybe not as divisive as we thought. That is clearly carried, but thank you very much. I think that's a very amicable debate, so thank you very much. Now, just so you know, in terms of timing, because obviously things have moved a little bit, we are now going to go to the vote of thanks, after which we will go to a closed business session, which I do hope you will stay for, because it's very important, on the business motion, which is on your bulletin today. In the meantime, though, do stay, and I'm going to invite up Robert Brown, because I would like him to say a few words about the recent passing of Councillor Chris Mason before we move to the vote of thanks.
Thanks very much, Chair. A week past Thursday, I had the privilege of attending the memorial event on the tall ship in Glasgow in the city for Dr. Christopher Mason. Christopher was the leader of the Liberal Democrats, or the Liberal Party at that time, on Strathclyde Regional Council for a period, and later on Glasgow City Council from 1987 in total, 1983, 1982 in total, until 2012 when he retired from the council. After which, as someone said, he sailed off into the distance to retire to Lanzarote, where unfortunately he passed away in August. Now, Christopher played a major part in the affairs of this party, and I think he'll be remembered by many, many people, particularly older people, in this hall. My first memory of him, or one of my first memory of him, is a Rothschild conference of the party way back. I think it must have been in the late 70s or the early 80s. I was detained by a storm along with a number of others. We spent the afternoon in the then Weems Bay Hotel, slightly inebriated. Christopher and the late Hugh Waterfield, however, took a yacht across to Rothsay. We thought never to be seen again, but they did in fact arrive safely. Christopher had a considerable reputation. He did a number of important things for the party. He was chair of the Scottish Liberal Party in 1982 to 3, I think it was, at the time, no, that's the wrong date, 1987 to 8, at the time of the merger with the SDP. And he played a considerable part in smoothing through that process, which some of us will recall as quite a difficult process at that particular time. After his retirement in 2012 from the council, such was his repute, he was appointed as the carers champion, the first carers champion by Glasgow City Council to represent the interests of carers. Not a nominal role, one which he took very seriously and for which he made a considerable contribution. Before that, at an earlier stage, you may recall perhaps the Strathclyde water referendum. Now, that was actually the cause why water in Scotland remains in public ownership, and the referendum was the brainchild of Christopher Mason. He put it forward, he persuaded the Labour leadership on the regional council to adopt it, and it achieved a 97%, that's a North Korean proportion really, isn't it, of support for keeping water in public ownership. Christopher had a considerable contribution that he made to the party. Willie Rennie talked earlier on in the context of his tribute to Ming Campbell about people being gritty. I think that description applied also to Christopher. Christopher was gritty. Christopher achieved things. Christopher was a champion for the causes in which he believed. And if I may say so, Liberalism has been fortunate to have champions of the calibre of Christopher Mason in supporting its cause. I very much miss him. I very much miss his passing, and I hope this conference will join me in recognising the work of Christopher Mason over these years in support of the Liberal cause. Thank you very much indeed.
So, conference, we're going to move to a vote of thanks before we go to our closed business session. And so I've got an able assistant over there, I'm hoping. So first of all, I want to thank the venue. I think this has been a fantastic venue for us. I think it's you know, everyone's really enjoyed it. I think the quality of the room's has been excellent and the support that we've had. So thank you to the venue. And then, yes, you can applaud if you like. And then I would like to call up our amazing team from Clifton Terrace who have worked so hard. First of all, I am going to call up Anna and Ed and Paul. And Kat, who's not here, but she will be here later. So if they could come up, that would be fantastic. Finally, I want to, from the staff team, I want to call up Susanna because really this is her baby and this is everything. You've been getting emails from her. She's been doing everything. So please put your hands together for Susanna McWhirter. Now, it won't be conference if there was a very special person in the room who you all speak to every single time you come here, and that is the wonderful and marvellous Kirsty Smith on the speakers table. Now, I've got a very special final vote of thanks, and it is to Paul, who is, who is our outgoing conference convener. I think that's 8 years, Paul, that you took over from me. Yes, and I think I might have convinced you to join the committee in the first place a few years before that, before I then got you to stand as convener. So I want to say a massive thank you to Paul. It's been 8 years, and whilst he's been in this role, he's introduced Pay What You Can. He's made a real, focus on going to places where our members are and to make it really accessible. He's also been in the Federal Conference Committee banging that same drum. So, Paul, I'm going to really miss you as an office bearer, but don't worry, I'm sure I'm going to find you another job to do. So don't you worry about it. So can everyone put their hands together and say a huge thank you to Paul McGarry. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for coming today. Now we're going to move into a private business session. So I would urge you to stay for that because we do need people in the room for that one. And then we'll go into the presidential hustings. So thank you very much to all of you. And I will see you in the next session.